Will Star Citizen stay as a kind of hardcore, full loot MMO? Is this the permanent state of affairs that we can expect moving forward? There are arguments for and there are arguments against, and both have reasonable merits. For a lot of people, this kind of breaks down to individual tastes, convenience, and replayability of a game. And there is kind of one example recently of a game that originally promised to be this and then changed. And that is, of course, New World. Now, obviously, very different games in many ways. And I think the only real true similarity that you could call out between these two games in most people's minds would be the fact that they both use the Lumberyard engine. But that's not entirely true. Both were originally conceived as hardcore full loot MMOs. And while, of course, you can say that there is a certain vocal support for these types of games in practical reality, they are very, very niche in their appeal. And so a lot of people might kind of say certain things, especially on Reddit or in YouTube comments or something like that, that they love these games ideas and they wish that there were more games like this. The truth of it is that most people just don't play these games. And when you're trying to generate a large amount of appeal, these ideas generally die off pretty quickly. And that's exactly what happened with New World. After the first round of testing went out, people just went, no, I definitely don't want to play this. And that is true of a lot of MMOs. Now, in a survival game, it's kind of a different story. If you experience survival games like Conan Exiles or whatnot, you very quickly find that hardcore full loot generally survives best on servers where there are certain areas of the game that are protected, or certain areas of players' infrastructure that are protected. And some people might say that, oh, no, that's a terrible rule. But when you really think about it, this is where you end up when you kind of travel around many of the public realms that you can get on in that game. When players' infrastructure is protected and considered to be kind of a no-touch part of their infrastructure, players do fight each other a lot more because now they have this kind of supporting base that allows them to make new swords, new shields, new armor, new spears, new bows, arrows, all that sort of stuff, and then get right back in the action again and again and again. And so they kind of, in a weird way, they kind of create almost like a traditional tab target MMO system where, okay, now you've gotten up to a certain level and you can't fall below that. Once you've fought your way up to certain levels, you can't, slip down below that, because even if you may lose your star metal sword or your star metal shield, back at your base, you have all this infrastructure that allows you to remake those items. And sometimes you have stored up resources that allow you to make those items multiple times over, which allows you to get back into the fight and allows you to have more PvP. And if you lose, the other person gets those weapons, but if you win, you get their weapons. And if you lose as a player, you're never truly ever put into a position where you're just forced to quit, because ultimately in a hardcore full loot survival game, if your infrastructure is destroyed, you might as well just quit, because it's going to take you forever to get back into the fight, so to speak, and then what's the fun of that? And that's kind of, when you come to a game like Star Citizen, this is kind of where I think that Star Citizen critically differs from the way that New World was presented in the very beginning. Because in New World, you were a member of one of three factions and you were always fighting each other for possession of an area. Whereas Star Citizen, you're not really a member of a faction. You're not the Marauders, or you're not, in a classic example, you're not Horde or Alliance or something like that, where you're kind of forced into conflict with the other group. Star Citizen is much more sandbox. You can be a member of an org, and that org can have alliances with other orgs, and once again, it's one of the many systems that we would love to see fleshed out a lot more in Star Citizen, but the game is, just not there yet. But realistically, we're not truly forced into conflict with other players beyond the idea that this player is a criminal, this player is law-abiding, when people are trying to hunt you down through a star system. And because there is no forced conflict, I think that the way the law system works between criminals and players who follow the rule of law as it's defined within the game, you can kind of see how if you're in safe space or secure space, as a player who obeys the rule of law, you're going to be reasonably safe. The way CIG is setting up the law system and the hunting system, roving around secure parts of a star system as a pirate or in secure star systems, you're going to be running into a hell of a lot of problems if you start attacking other players. And we've seen this with the bounty system and with the tracking of bounties within a star system. And viewing that from the idea of this is how we're going to protect players in secure space, while not implicitly making them 100% invulnerable to other players, we're going to make the price of attacking them so egregious that most players will avoid it in these certain star systems. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, when you go into a lawless system, let's say like Pyro, then the advantage slips over to the PvPers. And now they are untracked. They are roving around freely in this area, and there may be certain very valuable resources in that area that draw a lot of players into that area to engage in conflict, but there's nothing that forces you to be there. Similar to EVE Online, you may not want to go to 0-0, but you can earn the money in Empire to buy the things that are found in 0-0, so you're not really ever prevented from having access to something just because you don't want a PvP. And that's, one of the fundamental differences between the two games that I think means that Star Citizen reasonably following the rules that it's already laying out is going to continue very much down the line that it has kind of drawn for itself. It's going to definitely, I think, stay on course with what they have established, or mostly through written and spoken examples that they've given as to how the game is going to work. Is there anything that is going to change? I do believe so. When it comes to full loot, there are certain things that CIG is getting right, and I think there are certain things that CIG currently, as of the making of this video, are getting wrong. And the thing that really sticks out to me that CIG is getting wrong is the idea that any item that you purchase outside of the game, let's say as a subscriber, you're awarded certain things. You may go to the store during a sale and say, ooh, I like that skin for the LH86 or whatnot. Different weapons, different armors. Items bought through the store, I think, should be, 1, unlootable, and 2, they should be considered a different class of item. They should be somewhat sacrosanct and protected to the point that even though that item is not going to mysteriously appear on your person the moment you wake up in a hospital if you've been killed out in the world, but you should be able to, let's say, visit a mailbox or visit a booth somewhere in most space stations, and they'll say, oh, I hear, you know, you lost your item, here's your insurance replacement, and you get that item back. I think that if you really want to truly sell items out of the store and you want to support your game that way, you can't have these items be lootable or allow a player to effectively lose access to that item once they've been killed, because the appeal of that item will be diminished heavily. What is going to happen? I mean, its players are going to start looking at the game when they're losing items as that, oh, well, I don't really want to take this out because what if I lose it? And so the item really doesn't get used. If the item doesn't get used, what's the point of owning it? And that is probably where CIG is going to kind of do a bit of a course correction in the future. I mean, a perfect personal example would be, as you know, I was trying to make some videos around the time of the IAE sale. I was awarded certain armor as a subscriber, and I wanted to kind of put it on for the video, but as I was playing on one server, I got disconnected while I was messing around with this armor. And one of the pieces of armor was lost to me because I couldn't return to that server and pick up that armor off the ground. I no longer had that piece of armor, at least until 3.16 rolls around, and they're like, oh, well, there, we restored it to you. And that is kind of ridiculous. Because of the rules of the game, I lost access to this item. Even though I didn't do anything wrong, I wasn't killed. It was because of a server glitch and a server bug. And I think that in the future, if we were to continue with these rules, and there are obviously going to be glitches and bugs for a long time in Star Citizen, you can't really sell something in the store if players know that even if it's not their fault, that item or access to it could be lost. So ultimately, I think that CIG is going to change that rule, but broadly speaking, the way they're looking to regulate world PvP in Star Citizen, I think this is it's one of the better examples of CIG's judgment in terms of the rules of the game and how they intend to curb or discourage world PvP in certain areas, or non-consensual PvP in certain areas, versus encouraging it in others, making certain areas somewhat safe and other areas very dangerous. In a way, kind of going back to that rule I was talking about with Conan Exiles, where certain areas you're protected, certain areas you're not protected. That certain servers do, and that really does encourage PvP, and it encourages people to think that even if I do lose my items, there's a safe space that I can go back to and get those items back.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.